Max Lawson is the head of inequality policy at Oxfam International, and he joins us now live from London for more about the relevance of the G7. Welcome to the programme. So the UK, where you are, of course, has taken on the presidency of the G7 this year. Now, it's been going since the 1970s. Do you think it is damaging the world order if it doesn't have these powerful countries such as Russia and China in it?
I don't think it's damaging. I agree the G7 is less important than it was, absolutely. And I think the G20 is more powerful and more representative. But it's still important for the leaders of these 7 democracies to get together. I think what's damaging is their complete failure to do anything useful to tackle the crises of the world. And by that, I mean inequality, climate change, and of course, the COVID-19 crisis. I think if people saw the G7 taking positive, constructive steps, for instance, tackling big pharmaceutical monopolies, or as you say, rapidly increasing financing for climate change, then I think they would have a lot more faith in the institution. But they are failing the world. So the G7 is a failure at the moment, that is for sure.
OK, you're calling it a failure there. How do you monitor how is the G7 accountable for what they discuss, what they promise at their meetings?
Well, I've been following the G7 for many years, and I give you an example. I mean, in those days, it was still the G8 with Russia, but they had a very important meeting in the UK, in Gleneagles in Scotland in 2005, where there were massive worldwide protests. And there they made conscious decisions to cancel the debts of 40 African nations at the G7 that made a huge difference. So the G7 can take decisions if they want that can have a dramatic influence and impact on the lives of many, many people around the world. And they can lead from the front. They may not have the power of the world economy, but they once had. But imagine they set themselves targets to get rid of fossil fuels in the next 5 years. You know, what message would that send to the rest of the world? So they can and should do a lot more. They're not as powerful as they were 20 years ago, but they're still incredibly powerful industrialized economies. If you think of Germany, the United States, the European Union as a whole, what they say and what they do still matters. And they are absolutely failing to address the problems that we face today.
And going back to the countries that aren't in it, what do you think they can achieve without China and Russia being in it?
As I said, I think that the main thing they can do is lead by example. And I think that sets an enormous precedent for the world. So, for instance, if they were to insist that their pharmaceutical firms open up their patents and share their vaccines with the whole world so every manufacturer can make vaccines, that would put enormous pressure on the Chinese to do the same with their vaccine candidates or other members of the G20. Equally with positive moves on climate change. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're protecting their pharmaceutical firms. They're continuing to use fossil fuels, and that sends a bad signal to the rest of the world. So I think you do need the G20 to make collective decisions. You need the United Nations General Assembly to make collective decisions. But the G7 can still lead by example. At the moment, they're setting the worst possible example to the world.
Strong words there from Max Lawson. Thank you very much indeed. Great to get your perspective. Head of Inequality Policy at Oxfam International. Appreciate your time and opinions.